The original PlayStation is home to many video game classics of our childhood: Spyro the Dragon, Crash Bandicoot, and Parappa the Rapper. However, there are many original PlayStation games that have yet to have their fair share in the limelight. Reddit user Kindly Patrick has created an iceberg chart filled with plenty of obscure PS1 games, many of which you may have already heard of, and others that remain hidden in obscurity. So without further ado, here is the obscure PS1 games iceberg. LSD Dream Emulator. LSD Dream Emulator is a strange Japanese game released on October 22nd, 1998 by Asmic Ace Entertainment, based on a dream journal of a fellow Japanese man, Hiroko Nishikawa, with the music being composed by Osamu Sato. Unfortunately for PlayStation owners in North America, the game was never localized for players on this side of the globe. However, the game itself has built a cult following on YouTube thanks to creators like Mudahar from Some Ordinary Gamers and PewDiePie showcasing the game on their channels. However, for those anxious to play the game for themselves, a ROM of the game exists on the internet that can be downloaded and played with a PS1 emulator, or if you still own a PSP, you can jailbreak the device and import it on there and play it on the go as well, which was what I did in order to play the game myself way back when. As you may have guessed, the game is a dream simulator of sorts that has a set of fully explorable levels that are randomized according to the type of dream that is being emulated, and there is no correlation of the LSD drug. The levels that you play through are determined by an in-game dream chart that graphs the game's dream experience by 4 different categories: upper, downer, static, and dynamic. There are also multiple dream characters that can be seen while wandering around the many dreamscapes. The most famous would be the giant baby lurking in the hallways of the game's hotel area, and a dark shadowy figure that came to be known as the Gray Man amongst the community. He wears a dark gray trench coat and hat, and is first encountered in the game's Violence District, a dark city landscape with dark alleyways and inconspicuous lighting from the street lamps. Incredible Crisis. Known as Tandemo Crisis in Japan, Incredible Crisis is a game about, well, how do I say it? The game is basically one big fever dream, and it originated from the land of the rising sun, so you know it's going to be weird. The plot of the story consists of 4 working-class family members and their grandmother Hatsu and her birthday. Unfortunately for Hatsu, everyone forgot that today was her birthday, so now everyone must rush around and try to come up with last-minute birthday presents in an effort to make it early for Hatsu's birthday. The gameplay is very reminiscent to Nintendo's line of WarioWare games, with how wacky and straight-up absurd with some of how the minigames are played. Dance parties at the office, to an elevator rapidly falling down 50-plus story buildings, to a UFO showing its disinterest in a teddy bear by blasting it with its laser beams. But as I mentioned before, this game comes from the minds of the Japanese. So for their standards, it's just another day in the office. No one can stop Mr. Domino. This game is just one big domino effect. No, seriously, I'm not joking. The whole point of the game is to run around the arena and drop as many dominoes in a chain, and then run into them and set off a chain reaction. Oh, and as you can guess, Mr. Domino never stops running. Not even once. Never takes a breather, or a water break. Nothing. He just keeps running. That's it. I tried to make sense of the game, but the wiki was no help. But it did mention something about the game having 6 different levels and a couple side characters, which I did see during the gameplay that I watched. And from the video creator himself, he managed to explain some of the game's mechanics for us, so I didn't have to stress my brain trying to figure them out. And I quote, "No one can stop him." Actually, a lot of things can. The whole point, though, is that you can't stop him. He's always moving. Anyway, here's a weird game for you. It was released on the original PlayStation at a discounted price. I believe probably because it's so freaking short. But it's one of those games you're supposed to try and score a high score on, which I don't do here. I'm going through and showing a full domino chain on each level. Those R's I bump into, they reset everything. That's good to do if you make a mistake or something, but they can mess you up if you don't need them. You do want to use them if you want to keep resetting a level after making a minor domino chain so you can get more points and add up to a high score. Those little spots at the top, they're for every one of those buttons you hit with a domino that causes something goofy to happen and potentially continue a chain. Once you light up all those lights, the level is over. If you light them all up, or more, in one rally, you get a lot more points. And slow mode gives you nearly half the amount of points as fast. And I've got a lot more notes and things to say, but I think I'll save it for a video where I can actually score a lot. I will say that you do have a limited amount of stamina, and when it runs out, you turn back into a regular domino. That's what those health spots are for. Intelligent Cube. Known as the coolest name on the planet, Kurushi, in Europe at least, Intelligent Cube is that one game we all wanted, but we just didn't know we wanted it. Do you remember those death cubes from Mario 64? And how you had to either avoid them or take a risk of death and try to have them land on you when their hole was on the side that was about to squish you? Yeah, well, they actually made a game just like that. You're a little guy on a big map with even bigger cubes that you have to avoid before they crush you to death. I guess we can say you just have to be a little intelligent on your maneuvers. MDK. Murder, Death, Kill, or MDK for short, is an alien shooter from 1997 developed by Shiny Entertainment for Windows, developed by Shockwave for Mac OS, and the PlayStation port was made by none other than Neversoft, the developers for the best rhythm game series on the entire planet, Guitar Hero. As I mentioned previously, the game is one of those space shooters, kind of like Space Invaders, but more boots on the ground. Our main character, Kurt Hectic, Duke Nukem's fifth cousin who happens to be a janitor and wears an elongated plague doctor mask, must infiltrate a mine crawler, which is a massive city-sized vehicle, and fight through hordes of aliens known as Stream Riders, and make his way over to the man piloting the mine crawler, to then make his way back to his base of operations, a space station called the Jim Dandy. This plot is just as outrageous as Incredible Crisis, and that's saying something. Thrill Kill. Thrill Kill was supposed to be a fighting game developed by Paradox Studios, but it ended up being cancelled and therefore never released. If that development studio sounds familiar, that is because they also made the Crusader Kings series. I'm not too versed in Crusader Kings, but if I can say, I like to say it's a mix of Civilization and Tropico. So seeing how Thrill Kill is drastically different from a medieval Europe simulator, I'm kind of sad that we never get a chance to see how the game would have came out. However, we do know the plot line that would have taken place had the game been finished. Apparently the game was about 10 fighters that end up dying and being sent to hell to have a tournament fight hosted by Maruka, a goddess of death, also that the winner can be reincarnated and given another chance at life. Honestly, that story sounds badass. If there's anyone out there with the skills to make a game, hell, even an RPG Maker game, let this story inspire you to finish the dreams the minds at Paradox had envisioned. Heart of Darkness. This game here has a really cool cover. You gotta remember back then, when buying physical copies of games was your only avenue of playing them, one of the joys of buying games was just staring off at the front cover and the back cover art, and just imagining what the gameplay is like before you even buy it. The covers of games were like the thumbnails of YouTube videos. If that cover art didn't immediately suck you in, then you immediately thought it was a trash game. Well, this game here has a really cool cover. You got Odie and Jesse the Wizard stanced up with his floor deflabbulator, ready to slay some fools. And then there's that mysterious shadow lurking in the background. The story begins with our protagonist Andy being taunted in class by his teacher for his fear of the dark. Then his teacher gives him the idea to stare directly into the solar eclipse, and in the process a dark shadow kidnaps Andy's dog Whiskey to a world known as Darkland. And then Andy literally creates a machine that can take him to this alternate world where he travels and triumphs these new lands in order to save his beloved dog. Nearly as good as I Am Legend. Jumping Flash. This is a game you can actually go buy and play for yourself today, right now. This game just so happened to be released on every current PlayStation console since 2006. In the game, you control a giant robotic jumping bunny. What other game can you control a jumping bunny? Hell, the only games I could think of with even a rabbit is Minecraft and Terraria. But let's be real, Terraria did it first. If you haven't noticed already, the game is in first person, and the rabbit you're in control of is named Robbit, and his ever-long quest to collect missing jet pods that were scattered throughout the world like Dragon Balls by his lifelong arch-nemesis Baron Aloha. If you ask me, the game looks like a polygonal puke fest, but I won't lie. Something about games with this style of graphics just gives me that nostalgic, creepy, but not creepy feeling. I can't describe it any better than that, you just really gotta experience it for yourself. But I guess that's why this game has earned its spot on this iceberg. Tiny Tank. Have you ever played Heavy Weapon on the Xbox 360 arcade? That game where you control side-scrolling tanks and you gotta decimate all that dare oppose you? And sometimes you get nukes that you can use to wipe out every enemy off the screen? Well, it turns out Heavy Weapon actually embodies everything Tiny Weapon once stood for, plus nukes. But instead of being a side-scroller, Tiny Tank is a third-person shooter where you control Thomas Tank Engine's deranged German third cousin, Tiny, who's on a pretty damn journey for such a tiny tank. In Tiny's world, there was this corporation on Earth named Centrax, and Centrax wanted to use the machine they invented to fight humanity's wars for it. but they had to get the approval of the people, so what they did was create our man Tiny here. As a showcase of sorts, Centrax decided to create an event to show off the capabilities of Tiny, but that was when a turret that was actually loaded with live ammunition shot Tiny and shattered his AI consciousness, and it spread to the other robots and caused them to go sentient, and the one robot in particular, the one that happened to shoot the shot that deleted Tiny, establishes an identity known as Mutank, and he along with the other robots decide to eliminate humans so that machines can thrive. Eventually, after 100 years of being knocked out, Tiny is finally up and running after being repaired by these microscopic crabs that fix machines, and he vows to defeat Mutank and avenge his creators that thrived before him. Pretty freaking nuts. Vib Ribbon. There's not much going on when it comes to Vib Ribbon, however I will try to give my best. There's not much going on when it comes to Vib Ribbon, however I will try my best to give a detailed explanation. Vib Ribbon is an old rhythm game, not like Guitar Hero or Parappa the Rappa. It's actually more like Geometry Dash. Actually, just like Geometry Dash, in fact. You control a rabbit made of lines named Vibri, or Vibri. And you have to jump and avoid obstacles at the sound of the beats. And whenever you get hit by an obstacle, Vibri gets all scraggly until she becomes a mess of lines and falls apart, forcing you to start the level all over again. Pandemonium. A game following a jester named Fargus and a sorceress named Nikki that casted a spell on her town that ended up leaving it like Megaton. Now the pair must come together and journey to the Wishing Engine to undo the spell casted and bring back the village from destruction. RC Stunt Copter. Given that there wasn't much written on this game that I could find on the internet, the best I can do is give a brief description of what exactly the gameplay consists of. So the player is in control of an RC helicopter, if you couldn't tell by the name of the game, and it's basically like Rocket League, but instead of soccer, you're trying to land a toy helicopter and fly through the field goalpost in an attempt to get the highest score. There's also this very annoying narrator voice that tries to act funny, but is actually very irritating. Devil Dice. It's a puzzle game about baby devils running on a board game covered with dice. What more did you expect? Skullmonkeys. This game is actually a sequel to a game called The Neverhood. Both games were developed by The Neverhood Inc. and published by Electronic Arts. The story is centered around the main character, Clayman, who must defeat hordes of creatures called Skullmonkeys in order to defeat his old foe, Clog. Akuji the Heartless. Voodoo priest warrior Akuji is getting married, but on this same day, Akuji gets his heart ripped out of his chest, but due to voodoo magic, he is now cursed to wander the underworld and must find his way out. He eventually meets Baron Samedi and discovers that if he gathers the souls of his ancestors, he will be given another chance to walk the earth again. Tecmos Deception. A game like this would not fly by today's terms. You play as a Satanist that takes over ownership of a castle. You can also use the gold that you earn to edit your castle to add extra rooms and hallways, similar to the Link's Awakening map editor, and you can even place traps that will kill the unwanted guests that'll come visit you. Or you can capture them if you want to. Like this married couple that needs money for their ill daughter, so they came to you for help. But little did they know they would be captured and their souls offered to the demons of the underworld. Pepsiman. We've all seen this guy before. This is literally the next biggest Fortnite skin if they ever decide to do something like this. I can already imagine this guy in the game. He already looks like he belongs there. Pepsiman was a game published by Kid and released on March 4th, 1999. But this was one of those advertisement type games. For example, the Burger King guy games. Although they were actual good games, they were still advertisements for these companies. Basically, you run around as Pepsiman collecting and drinking Pepsi, while the game tells you to drink more Pepsi. That's it. Told you it was an advertisement. Boombots. Another game developed by the Neverhood, Boombots was a robot fighting game that featured 10 playable robots, as well as a claymation animation cutscenes that are pretty creepy. I don't know. Something about claymation videos just gives off an unsettling feeling. However, the game did manage to get approval by Steven Spielberg and was able to get that DreamWorks Interactive logo slapped right on the front cover. The gameplay, however, doesn't quite hold up to the quality of everything else, though. Especially that character select screen. That thing looks gorgeous. But the gameplay is just... ugh. So sad. Boku no Natsuyasumi. You ever played Animal Crossing? Or Harvest Moon back on the GameCube when you were a little kid? Well, this game is just like that, but for adults. Boku is a young boy that is sent on vacation to his aunt's house while his mother is in her final stages of giving birth. He passes the time while on vacation by exploring the area around his aunt's house, flying kites, and collecting bugs to square them up against each other with the other local boys he meets, all while spending time with his distant family. The game's creator, Kaz Ayabi, mentioned that his focus was on developing a game that simulates the real world of a childhood boy. And that he did. An immaculate job. Rogue Trip Vacation 2022. The developers of the game, SingleTrack, had worked with Sony, and they were contracted to release games only for the PlayStation. That was until SingleTrack was bought out by GT Interactive and released Rogue Trip as part of their new contract. They reused the game engine that they had used for the Twisted Metal series, and while the gameplay between the games was similar, the story had a few similarities as well. The game takes place in a post-apocalyptic scenario taking place in the year 2012 in a destroyed United States. There are a group of mercenaries that go by auto mercenaries, and they pick up tourists and hitchhikers and Uber them around to their destination, all while they fight enemy mercenaries using their vehicles and weapons picked up along the drive. Bad Mojo. Have you ever wanted to play a game about cockroaches? Well, boy, do I have a game for you. Bad Mojo is a story about learning one's past and reconnecting family back together. Set in 1995 in an old bar owned by a man named Eddie Batito, he has a tenant that lives upstairs named Roger. Roger stole a $1 million loan he had gotten from a science corporation he works for, and he has plans to flee to Mexico City. After a dispute with Eddie, Roger is reminded of an old trinket his mother had given to him. And this trinket transforms Roger into a roach, and he is transported to a sewer that is connected to the rooms throughout the bar, and he's guided by his deceased mother on a journey through his past. After a series of events, Roger has to save Eddie from a gas leak, and upon doing so, it is revealed that Eddie is actually Roger's dad, and that his mother had been trying to get them to finally get a chance to connect with one another. Tobal 2, an old fighting game published by Squaresoft, and boasts the achievement of the biggest character roster in a fighting game, with a total exceeding 200 playable characters. Silhouette Mirage. The game is a 2D scroller with 7 levels and features a combat system based on 2 different attributes, Silhouette and Mirage. Certain enemies are only damaged depending on the attribute that they are, so Shina, the game's main character, can change between these 2 attributes depending on the side of the screen she is facing. Shina was created by a supercomputer named Jahina, with a goal to track down and repair Ito to unite the beings that were created due to the experiments that Ito had been performing, all in order to undo the chaos that had happened to the world. Power Shovel. Power Shovel is quite a unique game, really. You're in control of a power shovel, and you're the new guy on site, with a piece of heavy equipment and a crazy foreman. You do a great job and you earn a lot of money and can go shopping. Do a bad job and you'll hear it from the boss. Grid Runner. Grid Runner is a top-down tag game where players run around a maze-like grid that they can manipulate to an extent. You can compete against other players or the AI, and they even came up with a story mode for this game. If you want to play an intense capture the flag match in a game that isn't Halo Reach, then be sure to give Grid Runners a try. Rising Zan. Now here's another game I wish I would have had the chance to play when it first came out. This game is a mix between an old Clint Eastwood Western film and Japan's Edo time period. The game's main protagonist, Johnny, is a cowboy that was ambushed and nearly killed by an assassin. After recovering his almost lifeless body, Johnny is trained in the way of the samurai by his late father's friend and returns to town under the new name Zan, and vows to defeat the assassin that made the attempt on his life. He wields his revolver, Johnny No More, in his left hand and his katana Demon Slayer in his right. And many of them refer to the game as the spiritual predecessor to the Devil May Cry series. Due to the game's similar wacky humor and combat combo system, there is also a ranking system at the end of each level on the scale from weak to bitchin'. Machine Hunter. In a world where robots and humans coexist, a virus is created that turns the robots into human-murdering machines. And the hope of humanity's survival is up to one man to destroy the machines and put an end to this wicked virus. The game is a top-down perspective shooter with over-the-top violence, and in a world like ours, especially with this new AI deepfake trend, who knows, maybe one day this will be our fate. Little Big Adventure. Before we even get started, I should mention that this game in fact has no connection to Little Big Planet. Trust me, I got hyped thinking there was a previous game that had existed on the PlayStation, But alas, I had gotten my hopes up, so to save you from the same fate, I figured I'd get that out of the way first. However, if you bought the game in Europe or Japan, it went by Little Big Adventure. However, here in the States and the rest of the world, the game went by a name, Relentless Toonenstein's Adventure. Which, it makes the game sound way cooler than it actually looks. The game takes place on a planet called Toonenstein, and the inhabitants of Toonenstein were all pushed to the southern hemisphere of the planet by an evil tyrant, Dr. Funfrock. And now it's up to Toonenstein to defeat Dr. Funfrock and free the people of Toonenstein. Crazy Ivan. Whoever made the cover art for this game was heavily inspired by the Terminator movies. So inspired, in fact, it didn't even attempt to make it any different from the movie's cover either. Crazy Ivan is a game about a Russian soldier named Ivan Popovich, who uses these military-grade mech suits to defend the Earth from a robotic alien threat. Finally, a game where the Russians aren't the bad guys and end up saving the world. They don't make them like that anymore. Life Force Tenka. Set on Earth in 2096, pollution and wars have turned the Earth from an ideal celestial body to a hellscape everyone is itching to escape. There is a planet just out of the solar system called Extravis 328 that is looking for new workers for their new corporate conglomerate that manufactures a new issue of Deadly Warriors called Bionoids. Your name is Joseph B. Tenka, a future Bionoid upset with the way things have been run, and you wish to bring an end to evil corporations' plans. Irritating Stick. Despite the name, Irritating Stick is just a video game version of Operation. But instead of trying to remove hazards from one's body, you're actually guiding a stick from one end of a maze to the other. And if you touch the sides of the wall, you'll irritate the stick and lose the level and have to start all over again. Mort the Chicken. In this universe, chickens are the dominant species on the planet, and Mort here stars in his very own television series. But when cube-like beings from an alternate universe called the Booleans are spying on them, and their leader, General Cubicles, makes the mistake that haystacks that the chickens have are actually citizens of their universe, and he decides to launch an offensive against Mort and his species, and kidnaps and scatters baby chickens all throughout the universe where Booleans come from. And Mort is the only chicken brave enough to enter an unknown world and save the chicks. Kula World. Developed by a Swedish game studio called Game Design Sweden AB, Kula World is a game where players take control of a Kula beach ball and must navigate through levels and collect jewels and keys to unlock the exit to progress to the next level. This game reminds me of that old marble game back on the Xbox Arcade. If you know, you know. Rat Attack. In a universe where a pair of lab rats sent to space become intelligent beings that rival the minds of humans, Washington and Jefferson, two rats, return to Earth and use their newly gained superintelligence to conquer the planet, amassing a massive army of rats with orders to destroy all that stand in their way. However, the cats on the planet get together and form a team known as Scratch Cats to combat the Rat Armada. Baroque. Set in a post-apocalyptic world after an experiment led by a being named Archangel to understand a being known as the Absolute God goes bad. It causes devastating events and climate change, and leaves any remaining humans that survive becoming twisted manifestations of guilt. Now it's up to the protagonist to work with Archangel and make their way through the Nero Tower to find the Absolute God and undo the disasters that change the world. Silverload. Taking place in 1879, a half-Native American bounty hunter under the name Gunslinger has his services hired by a traveling settler who had his son Ben kidnapped by raiders. Upon locating the raiders' trail and following behind it, the gunslinger ends up in a mysterious silver mining town named Silverload. The game originally released in Europe for PC, but the PlayStation version was given an international release. However, the ESRB rating system in the United States gave the game an M rating for mature due to the graphical content and profanity used in the game. Aquanauts Holiday. You know what I love the most about games from the early 3D era, spanning from about 1998 to 2004? It's that they did a lot of experimenting with different types of games and gameplay styles. For example, you have the 3D platformers like Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, and Crash Bandicoot. Then you have shooters like Perfect Dark and GoldenEye. But you also have experimental type games. Well, what do I mean by experimental type games? Well, have you ever heard of a game that was called Seaman on Sega Dreamcast, where you take control of a hyper-intelligent fish with the head of a man and follow him through the evolutionary course while Spock from Star Trek narrates the story? Well, they happen to make plenty of other games similar to Seaman, like Aquanauts Holiday. and the aspect of just playing the game, no convoluted story, no enemies shooting explosives at you and trying to kill you. It's just you, a massive ocean, and plenty of unique aquatic life for you to discover. And your only real goal in the game is to create a beautiful coral reef filled with sea creatures that call it home. Occasionally you'll come across underwater ruins and treasure to uncover, but most of the time it's just you and the fish. Broken Helix. The year is 2026, which isn't that far away from the date of today's recording. And Jake Burton is an explosive expert, a part of the United States Marines working at Area 51. I should also add that he's voiced by the one and only Bruce Campbell, so if you're a big fan of the man, you might want to play this game. To keep a long story short, Jake's dad also worked at Area 51 as a scientist that performed top secret experiments. When Jake was 9 years old, he was told that his father had died along with 10 other scientists in a plane crash, but no other information on such an event was provided. Down the line, Jake is contacted by a nameless man that tells him he once knew his father and had a decent relationship with the guy. Jake gets contracted by the military and gets sent out on a mission to defuse bombs, and the game takes a spiral when it comes to the story. At the time of the game's release, when Konami was developing the game, they marketed a key feature of the game they called 4D, and that was because all of the game's events unfold in real time. But this doesn't mean what you think it means. You see, unfolding in real time for gaming terms is basically, there's an endgame clock or a timer that ticks down as you're playing the game. While shooting your way through enemies, solving puzzles, and even cutscenes, the endgame clock keeps on ticking. Think of Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. There's a 3-day time cycle that you have to keep in track of before the world ends, but instead of time only going down when you're running around the world, in Broken Helix the clock is always going. There are also 4 different endings the player can achieve while playing, each of which is achieved through the different decisions the player makes early on in the story. Guardians Crusade. Known in Japan as Night and Baby, Guardians Crusade is a JRPG developed by a studio named Tamsoft. Although the game itself didn't receive much commercial success due to many claiming it to be a child's introduction to RPG games, it did, however, have a few notable features that were uncommon and quite impressive for JRPGs at the time, one of which was the seamless transitions between entering towns and the overworld, as well as a feature that we all wish was in the early Pokemon games, the ability to choose whether or not you wish to engage in combat when exploring instead of random encounters every 5 steps. Awesome. Forsaken. In the distant future, the advancement of science has exceeded humanity's ability to control it. During a subatomic experiment, an accident causes an uncontrollable fusion reaction, utterly destroying the surface of the planet Earth. 1 year later, Earth has been classified as condemned by the ruling imperial theocracy, meaning that it is now legal for anyone to salvage anything left on the planet. Mercenaries from all over come to raid the dead planet, forced to battle not only each other, but the robot sentinels that the government has left behind. Now, I should also note that the game's main objective differs depending on the console you're playing it on. On the Nintendo 64, your main objective is to defeat... On the N64, your main objective is to defeat all the looters trying to steal a great treasure. And on every other version of the game, you're actually trying to recover this lost treasure for yourself. They also remade this game back in 2018 for PC and Xbox One, so if you want to give the game a try for yourself, it shouldn't be too hard. Monster Seed. Monster Seed is a brand new type of monster collection RPG. The player has to gather monster eggs, incubate them, and then send their collection of different monsters to battle. The player controls Master Daniel, who is a ruler of monsters. With Daniel, you have to venture through a dungeon map, fighting enemy rulers and monsters and clearing given tasks. By using separate memory cards, you can make these monsters fight against each other. With Monster Seed, you can enjoy the fun of creating your own ultra-powerful monsters. Project Overkill. The game takes on a 3D-esque isometric view in which the player chooses one of 4 mercenaries to lead through the levels. The characters act as lives, and if one were killed, the player still has a choice among the remaining mercenaries, rather than having multiple lives for one character. In the levels, the player must find key cards, destroy guards, kill aliens and robots, activate laser bridges to complete an objective. Objectives include finding the exit to the level, assassination of an officer, escorting a defect or other important NPC, retrieving an item, usually a memory chip or the like, or obtaining a certain percentage of kills in the area. The 4 characters have very different skills. For example, the large alien, Quag, has a melee attack that will kill the standard human troops in just one hit. Also, each character has slight variations in weaponry that make for somewhat different combat experiences depending on the character you're playing on. Sheep. The player gets to choose between 4 different sheep herders, and the goal is to escort sheep that are actually aliens from a planet named Ovis Aries that are disguised as sheep through a plethora of obstacles such as archers, knights, and demonic chefs, all while trying to reach the finish line and complete the level. Perfect weapon. An Earth Defense Force top agent and martial arts world champion named Blake Hunter is knocked out after winning a match and taken away to an alien environment. Now all alone, Blake explores his surroundings, fighting for his life and trying to find answers as to what happened. The Divide, Enemies Within. In The Divide, Enemies Within, the player takes control of an explorer of an alien planet. After they land to investigate, they are attacked where the player is frozen and their partner kidnapped. After being thawed, the player takes control of a mech and sets out to rescue their partner and destroy the alien menace. The basic gameplay has a player explore through 8 different worlds with a total of over 100 different stages in a 3D environment. The player explores the levels, collecting new weapons and power-ups to fight out the 20 different enemies scattered throughout the level, and at the end of each level, the player must fight off an enemy boss before fighting the final boss at the end of the game. Pinobee, Wings of Adventure. Grandpa Bee has been kidnapped before finishing you. Pinobee. A robotic bee made to defend the world. The player must go through 9 worlds in order to find and rescue your creator, Grandpa Bee. There are multiple storylines with multiple endings. Pinobee can take out most enemies by jumping on top of them, but the most important means of attack is a dash which can be executed in any direction. The amount of consecutive dashes can be upgraded when meeting a certain character. Pinobee collects flowers, and question mark bubbles provide power-ups, enhancing the dashes, providing temporary shields or other bonuses. Players can use the game link to collect and trade items with friends for power-ups. Tale of the Sun. When the game begins, the player is situated at the home village with no goals, objectives, or guidance. The protagonist is free from the outset to go nearly anywhere and do basically anything. The landscape the player inhabits is not only shared by a variety of polygonal fauna, but by flora rendered in the form of mochi of various shapes and colors, which have varying effects on one's health and various status. While exploring the landscape, the player's character will need to sleep and will often choose to do so while in the middle of running, hunting, or swimming. The North American release allows the player to wake the caveman up when this happens. The player's ultimate objective is to build a tower of mammoth tusks that reach the sun. To this end, a large map full of various creatures and oddities must be traversed in an effort to locate and gather sufficient food for the tribe to thrive and multiply. Dreams to reality. In this game, you play as a man named Duncan, and Duncan is on a quest to save the world of dreams and reality from a dark force. You must traverse floating aisles and defeat monsters and collect all the objects in order to advance to the next level. Excalibur 2555. Mysterious soldiers from the future have traveled back in time to steal Excalibur from King Arthur's court. The wizard Merlin sends a young female warrior, Beth, into the future to retrieve it. With her giant sword in hand, Beth travels through a gloomy underground city, helping out the local people whenever she can. Excalibur 2555 plays similarly to Tomb Raider, and that players roam fully through 3D environments, solve puzzles, and collect items which can be used and saved for later use. Johnny Bazooka Tone. The original guitar hero with the Elvis attitude and purple hair pompadour, Johnny Bazooka Tone has been imprisoned in the year 2050 in Sin Sin prison by El Diablo, the Lord of the Underworld, who is jealous of his talent and kidnaps other musical legends. In this 3D side-scrolling platformer, Johnny's guitar Anita has been taken from him, and he sets out to escape and vanquish foes on his way to be reunited with Anita. He can perform such moves as 360 spin jumps and hover jumps, among others, while using his bazooka guitar as a weapon. When powered up, it can emit a special sonic blast that fries anything within hearing range. As you make your way through the demonic levels such as Hotel Demonique, Hell's Kitchen, and Mr. Diablo's fiery penthouse, you can acquire more weapons, power-ups, and find secret passages that lead to bonus levels. The game's soundtrack includes the title track contributed by Bon Jovi guitarist Richie Sambora and Tico Torres. Monkey Hero. In this game, you play a monkey, a brave little monkey, who has been trained by another monkey called Master Sage. When the game begins, there are 3 worlds that are fighting against each other: the dream world, the nightmare world, and the waking world. The Nightmare King has stolen a book, the Magic Storybook, which is keeping the peace in the three worlds, and you have to get it back. Make your way through the waking world while fighting the Nightmare King's minions to get the book back. Travel through libraries, forests, and mines. Make friends which will help you on your quest. Use your weapons to crush crates, and these crates can contain fruit which will increase your health. If you don't have a weapon to crush the crates, then you have to throw them. You'll acquire 2 weapons throughout the game. A bamboo stick to hit your enemies and small rockets, or spears to shoot down enemies far away from you. Solve many puzzles, defeat bosses, and you get to explore a large world. Steel Harbinger. In the year 2069, North America is shaken by war. Canada and Mexico are combating the United States. Not long after the start of the war, alien pods rain down from space onto North America, sprouting metallic tentacles upon landing. The tentacles attack humans and animals, transforming them instantly into monstrous alien biomechanisms, bent on destroying any human life they encounter. Dr. Bowen, a scientist, studies one of these pods in an attempt to learn about the alien species. The pod breaks out of control and attacks his daughter, Miranda, but when Dr. Bowen severs the attacking tentacle, Miranda is already infected. Thus, she transforms into Steel Harbinger, a half-human, half-biomechanical alien, and humanity's last hope for survival. Miranda must battle her way through Kansas, Las Vegas, San Francisco, Houston, Cape Canaveral, Washington, the Antarctic, and an alien planetoid, and the moon in an effort to save the Earth. Toonenstein, Dare to Scare. Trapped inside Baroness Toonenstein's mansion, Furball with Panicky Pals Plucky Duck and Hampton J. Pig must avoid getting their brain swapped with Elmira's cuddly creation, and find the mansion's riches if they are able to. In this haunted hide-and-seek, the only chance of escape is to redirect the mansion's creepy power and stop Elmira. Silent Bomber. The government managed to create a genetically engineered man they call Judah Fate, who just so happens to be an expert when it comes to handling and using explosives. You can collect these things called E-chips that allow you to increase the capacity of bombs you can carry. Basically, the game is about blowing things up before you can get a chance to blow you up. Well, we managed to cover 3 out of 6 tiers for this Iceberg. If you're interested in watching my other Iceberg video on video game hoaxes or the creepypasta Iceberg, then you can click the thumbnails on screen right now, or either the link in the description below or the card box that'll pop up on the right hand side of your screen. Don't forget to slap that like button and stay tuned for part 2 where we go over the last 3 remaining tiers. I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.
Television, fan on the ceiling, abstract art on the walls, living different. 1989, talking on the phone, wind blowing hard, all the windows closed. Turquoise sheets, pink pillows, Motel 6, that's room 24. Meet you in the morning, meet me here tonight. Vibrating bed, gotta say it all right. Black marble sink, gold in the faucets, fresh bar soap, many shampoo bottles. Playing some Atari, she blowing on my cartridge. Room service knocking, I can hear him at the door. Do not disturb, hanging